On a recent AMA on Reddit, somebody asked me, is The Apprentice going to cause outrage? And I thought about it for a long time. And ultimately, I began wondering, is this film just too partisan, especially about a month away from an election, that people and audiences are going to simply ignore The Apprentice and this won't end up being talked about? Or is this going to go through the outrage cycle? Ultimately, that kind of leads me to this review. And The Apprentice, by design, is a partisan film. The reasons it's a partisan film is because, simply put, a Republican would never make this movie about Donald Trump. The current state of the Republican Party would not allow a film like this to be made about Trump from a quote-unquote Trump filmmaker or right-wing filmmaker. So now the director of The Apprentice has an interesting quote here that I think is actually worth exploring, which is, I don't think that this is a movie that he, being Trump, would dislike. He doesn't think Trump would dislike this movie. I don't know if that's a bit of a cheeky response from him, or I don't know if that's willful ignorance. Trump clearly doesn't like this movie. People associated with his team, his law team, have tried to sue this movie. There has been so much outrage about this movie in the distribution. Acquisition ended up going to a smaller distribution, getting its release soon. And then Abbasi also made this quote here, "Make movies political again," obviously a reference to Trump's MAGA movement. And I was thinking about that while watching The Apprentice, which is essentially, is a movie about a person who is political, inherently political. And so let's just kind of get into some of the big themes that I wanted to hit with The Apprentice today in my review. Is Sebastian Stan a good Trump? That was something that a lot of people asked me in the AMA on Reddit. What makes the Jeremy Strong performance so critically acclaimed? Is this film about the now? Is it about the present? And what to make of the Maria Bakalova role / women's involvement in this film? For those who are not aware of what The Apprentice is, it is essentially Donald Trump's rise to fame in late 1970s New York and his ascent to become one of the biggest businessmen in New York City. So this follows New York City at a really low point in the 1970s and essentially the real estate boom that goes into the 1980s. Specifically, this movie is about Donald Trump and his relationship with his mentor, Roy Cohn, who is this figure who was big in the McCarthy movement of the 1950s. He is this attack lawyer who essentially gives Trump the playbook of how to become successful. At the center of this movie is Sebastian Stan's portrayal of Donald Trump, which is such a hard performance to do because we all know Donald Trump. This is a person, a caricature that we are all familiar with. We've seen impressions. Everybody can do a Trump impression. Like, we all are bringing something into this performance. So to see Sebastian Stan do it, I think people are going to struggle with this performance because this isn't a caricature performance. He actually strips Trump of the mannerisms, the catchphrases, the caricature points that make him so easy to parody today. And instead, it really grounds this performance in a real way. It's a very humane performance of Donald Trump. And I think some people are going to struggle with the fact that this is a film that gives Donald Trump a humanity, especially, again, bringing back to this idea of partisan. Some people are just not going to want to seek out a film about Donald Trump being a human being and not being a full-on monster. I understand those feelings. And I will say, I think The Apprentice does a wonderful job at transitioning Trump into something that feels more like he is today. It is a gradual performance from Stan. It is an extremely subtle performance from Stan. And as we see him losing his humanity in the film, it really works wonders to explore the ever-corrupting power that is greed, that is ambition. That is the thematic weight of this movie, a human losing humanity in the search of power. And what I find so interesting about this approach, especially as we get into the Roy Cohn character played by Jeremy Strong, is between these two men, it feels like there is a scale. of humanity and greed and ambition. And once one character leans this way, the other one leans the other way. So once we see Trump losing his humanity in the search of greed, we then see the Roy Cohn character start to gain a bit of humanity. Let's talk about the Roy Cohn performance right now, because it is actually the skeleton key to understanding The Apprentice. Roy Cohn is played by Succession actor Jeremy Strong. Jeremy Strong shared this really interesting quote on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, which really sums up what I believe the movie to be about.
I was thinking about this coming in here. There's something that William Saroyan wrote in The Time of Your Life. He said, "Despise evil and ungodliness, but men of ungodliness and evil, these understand."
Whether you want to argue this movie is doing that in good faith, I think is a fair enough argument to make. However, I do believe that is the approach that Jeremy Strong and Sebastian Stan are taking to this performance. And it really is shown in the Jeremy Strong performance as Roy Cohn. Essentially, we meet Roy Cohn as this attack lawyer in the 1970s when he first befriends Trump. And the thing about Jeremy Strong that makes this performance so wonderful, and it's the reason it's gotten such critical acclaim, is because this person right away is a monster. You feel it in the performance. You feel it when he just appears on screen. He is the devil incarnated in this movie. It is such a terrifying performance from Strong. Everything he does just feels so eerie and creepy and alien-like almost in some degrees. It's such a shocking performance from him. I wrote in my review that the tension in his facial muscles give him an almost serpentine appearance, while his bluntness and nonchalance convey an otherworldly malevolence. You don't almost know how to comprehend it. And it's then such a miracle of a performance from Strong, and it shows how strong of an actor he is. The fact that we can then watch this person gain a little bit of humanity, not enough to really humanize this person, but enough to show that there is something of humanity resembling in this character. I thought one interesting aspect of this movie, and it's actually a criticism I have of this movie, is this film certainly goes into Roy Cohn's personal life, which he had a very rambunctious personal life that was certainly media covered and seemingly not in line with the conservative politics he spat out. What I believe Ali Abbasi, the filmmaker, is trying to do with this and showing it in the movie is he's trying to show the irony of this conservative figure and other conservative figures that we see in this movie, then leading debaucherous lifestyles as we see in this film, to show that even the people spewing conservatism don't believe in conservatism. I believe this film tries to do it, and this film may even think that it is doing it in a way of scathing or of actual substance. I didn't find that to be the case of this movie. I thought it was a little thin in its actual political approach to this movie. It doesn't really say a lot about conservatism outside of really just pointing out the irony, which is also a big point with The Apprentice. I would not say that The Apprentice is inherently a political movie in its contents. Rather, its existence is politically charged because it is Donald Trump and that he is running for president as we speak. However, where I think The Apprentice does succeed in its political telling is its understanding of Trump and his politics in this movie. We don't really have any reason to believe that in this movie, Donald Trump has a strong partisan belief one way or the other. Rather, he lacks clear ideological beliefs. For him and his character, politics serves merely as a means to an end in their pursuit of power. That is, I believe, what you are supposed to take away from the Donald Trump character in this movie, and it's why I found it such a fascinating character study. It is a movie solely dedicated to explaining how people get ahead, how narcissists are built, and how then the damage is then passed alongside to us. That is really, when you talk about this movie, is it a film about the present? It's not political in the liberal conservative way of thinking of politics. Rather, it is political in the approach and narcissism within politics today, and how that then is put on us, and we have to deal with those repercussions. That is where this film is political. This film doesn't have anything really to say about the 2016 election. However, this film is all about the 2016 election. This film doesn't have anything to say about January 6th. However, all the lessons Donald Trump learns in this movie have everything to say about January 6th. That is when I am talking about this film being in the present. It is the lessons of the past influencing the now. And that's what we see so well displayed in this movie. I really like this approach, and I really like that Ali Abbasi commits to this idea. And it's apparent through his filmmaking. This movie starts off in the 1970s, and we see New York as the grungy place it is. We see it capturing that aesthetic that has been captured so well in other films like Taxi Driver. And then we see this film shift to a little bit more cinematic in the 1980s. And we see this quote unquote cleaner New York. But what's so great about his camera work in this movie is even amongst the clean, you still feel the grime. It is literally just polished. And that is all this character and these people are. They've taken something disgusting and just polished it to make it more bearable to look at, but it's still the same ugliness that you're used to. That is what New York City feels like in the 1980s, and it's such a subtle but clever way that Abbasi deals with this approach and hits the thematic weights of this movie. Now let's get into some of the more controversial moments of this film, which is certainly the Maria Bakalova performance as Ivana Trump and the Trumps' relationship together. This film is certainly going to anger some people in its approach, and Trump has already this is the area of defamation that he is trying to claim. Scenes that are depicted in this marriage as it turns abusive. I understood this approach and understood why the filmmakers decided to lean into this element of the romance. The issue that I had with the Ivana Trump performance is simply that this movie doesn't really care about this character, and Maria Bakalova isn't that strong of an actress to be able to make you care about this character. She doesn't have incredible romantic chemistry with Donald Trump, which maybe is purposeful, but again, you just don't really feel this connection, and you never really feel this love, which is important to establish because we see the love turn to bitterness and a hatred as the film goes along. So in that ways, I found the performance a little stilted from Maria Bakalova. However, what this performance is in this movie is it's a role. It is serving a larger point. The larger point is, again, to be seeing this character lose humanity, and the way that he does it is in shocking and upsetting ways. That is really the tool that Ivana Trump serves in this movie. This movie isn't really interested in making her feel like a human, like a character, like the other ones are. Rather, she is a stand-in to further display how Trump loses more humanity. So it is a pretty thankless role that Maria Bakalova is asked to play. It is also the issue if she doesn't elevate it to anything more. I believe this approach ultimately does help the movie. However, I will say that had this been done better and had they fleshed out more of their relationship and had I felt more of the chemistry, I think the turn and some of the more controversial moments in this film that have led to the defamation, that have led to such criticism from Trump and his legal team would actually be more warranted and pay off better within the actual film. With that all said, I really did enjoy The Apprentice, and I can recommend it to people. Obviously, I kind of think everyone who is watching this review has their mind made up of whether they are interested in seeing this movie, whether they think it's a partisan piece of crap, whether they just do not want to engage with a figure like Donald Trump. Everyone's going to bring something different into this film. But I think if you are interested in this movie, there is a lot to like. I know some people will ask, did you learn anything from this movie? I won't necessarily say I learned anything that I didn't know about the Trump-Roy Cohn relationship. I will say that I don't think that's an issue, though. I don't think I needed to learn anything from this movie. Rather, seeing it lived out and seeing it brought into these terms, I found to be a worthwhile experience, worth telling this story. Some other people are just going to say this is a Wikipedia story and there's not much substance to it. I understand, I disagree, and I think that this movie is worth the watch, and it is going to be, my guess, a topic of discussion as we get closer and closer to an election day. So thank you so much for watching this review. I'll be back in a few days. I'm doing The Wild Robot. I'm doing Saturday Night. I'm doing Hellboy, The Crooked Man. I'm doing A Different Man. I'm trying to think what other movies I have. Piece by Piece is coming out, so I'll have a review out for that soon. And all of that, etc., etc. So thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.